Good morning, PD. You're listening to Live and Local Mornings for Florence and the PD on Live 95.
Takes Mondays to make Fridays. Blue Line Shooting Center is our sponsor. Visit their website, bluelineshootingcenter.com. Go to their Facebook page as well. We've talked a lot this morning about the legacy of George H.W. Bush. Red, when I die, if they say decent, humane, patriotic, all these sorts of things is a life well lived. Obviously, there'll be a lot of debate about the political life of George H.W. Bush, but there'll not be much debate about the decency of the man. It's hard to find anybody to say something negative about George H.W. Bush. What we know from afar. We hear things, we read things, we take third-person accounts or first-person accounts into the interactions they've had with former presidents. We have a former Secret Service special agent in charge during his 3 decades in law enforcement. He's protected most of the presidents, former presidents, and first ladies. Robert Caltabiano is with us. Robert, good morning, and thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning.
If you don't mind, did you have any personal interaction with former President George H.W. Bush?
Oh, yes, many times. I was with him after the White House for several years. And it was just a wonderful time to be around. You know, I equate him, excuse me, I have a cold, as the Jimmy Stewart of the presidency. If many of your listeners remember the actor Jimmy Stewart, and It's a Wonderful Life, it really was, in my view, being around him and Mrs. Bush, a wonderful life.
Robert, from that perspective, we hear stories, and all we can do is trust the news accounts, and very often they get politically motivated to try and spin a story or create a narrative. From your perspective, when we say things like decent and kind and gentle and fair, from your perspective as someone who knew the president, or those the sorts of things that you remember him being attributed to and about?
Yes, and so much more. Tough, patriotic, strong, very, very, let's say kind, humble. You know, he would talk about not being what he called a braggadocious, letting others get the accomplishments. Don't brag about what you did. Say thank you. You're welcome. And that was him. You know, that's how he was brought up, and I saw it firsthand. That's how he taught his children.
When you look at the life of George H.W. Bush, you see a family that was dramatically affected by he being the patriarch of this family. He, along with his wife, Barbara Bush, have a lot to be proud of. They've had a lot of political influence in our world. Did you ever see in the first person some of the family interaction? Because he appeared to us from a distance to be so proud of that Bush family unit.
Oh, all the time. You know, when the children or the grandchildren would visit them, whether we were in Houston or up in Maine, just a smile. I remember a quick story just before I was leaving what we call his detail at the time. It was just before the election in 2001. And I had about an hour with the former president in his office. And we were just talking, and you take your customary picture. And as I was leaving, I said to him, Mr. President, I'm sorry that I will not be there with you if and when your son becomes president, gets elected to the presidency. And he was sitting behind his desk, and he stood up, and he wiped some tears away from his eyes. And game over, we hugged, and and I left the room. But that was him. You know, he was not afraid to show a tear from his heart, and that is, to me, is just the epitome of greatness. That a man who is the most powerful man in the world was not afraid to show his heart out in public.
I know that you guys being the Secret Service, you have an obligation and a responsibility that is very evident. You take care of the presidents. Their life is in your hand, but there's still a humanistic element here. I mean, you've got a professional obligation to secure and make sure a president is cared for. But I want to go to the humanistic as my last question. I'm not asking you, did you like certain presidents more than other presidents, but when you think about George H.W. Bush and some of the other presidents you dealt with, what was unique or different? What do you remember about him that was a little bit special and different from some of the others?
Well, first of all, I didn't vote for every president that I protected, and that's not about that. But for him, and I think the same way as a few others, Reagan especially, that I was around, just the kindness, that they didn't have to do things in a certain way. But I'll give you an example. The President and Mrs. Bush, and this will answer your question, during the holidays, and that will come up to Christmas, would never travel. They would always stay home. And the reason why they did that was not because of them. They had the children all around the country. It's because of us, the Secret Service. They did not want to take us away from our families on Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter. And to me, that said a lot. And I'm forever grateful for that, because even though I may have had to work, I was home for the holidays.
That's a good story, Robert. We appreciate your time. Godspeed to you as we all mourn collectively a president that some of us voted for and some of us did not. Thank you very much for your time.